Free agency frenzy is upon us, and Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears have added all kinds of players to the roster, even if maybe not exactly the players that you were anticipating. Nick Whalen and I will go through all the ups, the downs, and the ins and outs of Chicago's current free agency approach, as well as what we may see when the new league year actually starts on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Us. My name is Robert Schmitz. I'm your host, the editor-in-chief of the Bears blog, right alongside my co-host, Nick Whalen of Football Guys, and we are trying to put together the best Chicago Bears podcast that we possibly can for you. Free agency frenzy is upon us, like I mentioned in the intro, or at least, Nick, at this point, the legal tampering period, the part where we finally get to find out what deals agents have been cooking up since the combine, since they definitely weren't allowed to speak to each other until then. And I have to imagine that the NFL got pretty frustrated at what was it? It was a Bengals deal, right? That got signed at 11:01 Central Standard Time at the opening of legal tampering last year. Everybody's feeling out exactly how they want to go ahead and make it clear that these deals, they totally weren't negotiated during tampering. They totally were. But jokes aside, Nick, how's your free agency experience been so far?
I mean, I love it. I mean, this is the fun part. I think the offseason is almost more fun than in season, which seems weird. The free agency and the draft, but there's a lot of questions about Chicago, so I'm glad we're going to be able to record. And the reason why we kind of waited, y'all, is we wanted to have some Bear news and some people sign before we do this. So we definitely have a lot of things to talk about. I mean, we could start, Robert, with, I mean, Jalen Johnson's back. You know,
Oh,
4
yeah.
years, 76 million, 44 guaranteed, which is basically 2.5 ish years, almost 3 years. Um, I mean, I think that's better than I expected, because I expect him to reset the whole market, and that wasn't the case. So I'm okay with that. Are
It
you?
was it's hilarious, Nick, because you mentioned before this show, you said something to the effect of, well, we haven't talked about Jalen Johnson yet. And I remember thinking at the time, this was 30 minutes ago, Jalen Johnson, we've talked about him almost every week. What do you mean we haven't talked about him? And I'm
Mhm.
just now remembering that you're right. Last show, we talked about Jalen getting the tag. Now we
Yep.
get to talk about Jalen getting an extension. And what a sweet extension it is. Not only does it meet literally all the criteria that you and I have been talking about, right? That it is under 20 million AAV, which is its own coup. It's about 2.5 years guaranteed. So right
Mhm.
on that 2 year guaranteed mark, plus a little bit. And the Bears get to start the offseason strong by bringing home a locker room leader that now kind of gets to be the example for the rest of the room, right? This is Ryan Poles' message. If you perform, we will pay you. I can't help but see this as every bit the positive that everybody has made it on social media. It's easy on social media for everything to be automatic good move. That's a good move. That's a good move. You're always handed out dubs on Twitter, right? But in this case, I really think it's a great move for Chicago. Gets them exactly what they need in their defensive backfield and sets them up for a free agency period that I swear, Nick, if there's one part about Jalen Johnson's deal that just sticks with me, it's that through signing Jalen Johnson, the Bears, they didn't backload the deal per se. It's a pretty standard modern deal flow that you lower the first round or the first year's cap hit to the signing bonus plus a small roster bonus, but it did create about $7 million of cap space, as did some of the Bears' initial signings, which has me wondering if the Bears are angling for some kind of big fish. But I don't know, Nick. That's just my one question about this free agency period that I'll throw out now, completely out of our schedule, because it really is something that I is gnawing at me. The Bears sure seem like they're planning something. You know what I'm saying?
I know. So y'all, the time of this is 6:03 on the 12th of March, and Daniil Hunter just signed with Houston. Okay,
Yep.
so that's where we're at. Anything can happen, but you're right, Robert, because Chicago has been patient, and that's the one thing I think that's been very true with Poles. Besides maybe the Tremaine Edmonds deal, is that he has signed what he has thought were good values. He hasn't really gone way above for anyone, and he has a price and he sticks to it. And I mean, it helped with the Jalen Johnson negotiations, who even he threatened to, hold out or trade me. It helped with Cole Kmet. I don't think he overpaid there, especially knowing what Noah Fant got in free agency. So he's doing that with all these free agents. But you don't want to miss out on everybody. I At the end of the show, here's the teaser to keep everybody. I have some trade ideas that maybe is what's going to happen with this extra money. But I think we got to pull back real quick. The Bears have signed some players, Robert,
Yes, they have.
and Kevin Byard is the guy we have to start with
Yep.
because
Let's go in order.
yeah, I watched some all 22 tape of him. I know you did as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they signed him 2 years, $15 million.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the one thing I think that people might be like, well, hold on. Philly traded for him and then they cut him. So he must not be good. Well, Philly cut him because it saves them $13 million and they only lose out on 1.39 million in dead cap. So financially it made sense. I mean, he wasn't going to make 13 million per year. But I watched so you watched his Tennessee tape, is that right?
I watched both Tennessee and Philly. I caught some
Okay.
of each.
All right, I watched the last 2 games that he played, all 22. Did you watch those 2 or different Philly games?
I try to take a scatter approach whenever I'm
Okay.
watching free agency. So I watched a week 3 in Tennessee. I watched him midweek against the Chiefs in the Eagles uniform when he had just recently gotten there. And then I watched like a week 15 or the Seahawks game, as a matter of fact, which
Okay.
the moment I turned it on, I went, "Oh, I've totally seen this game before."
Yeah.
And you watch it from a new perspective when you're focusing on the defense, right?
Yeah. Well, we all watched different games. So, I mean, you got to watch the, Patrick Mahomes pick
I
from
did.
Byard in the end zone.
And it's
Yeah.
funny watching Bayard because at least I am, as you know, one of Eddie Jackson's biggest supporters. I will always miss you, Eddie. But Bayard brings a lot of the same positives. He diagnoses plays outstandingly quickly. He
Yes.
gets to his spot and takes up space in zone coverage really well, both when he's in the deeper third of the field, whether he's playing single high safety or whether he's playing more of a quarter or half field role, he's on the ball. He reads routes really well, but also when he's playing an underneath buzz, hook, or curl defender, he breaks on routes and forces the quarterback to progress off of slants consistently because he's
Mhm.
always hunting underneath for that potential pick six. Really the only thing in Byard's game, because you also see him able to man up against tight ends, both when he's playing catch man off the ball and not press man, but about 4 or 5 yards off the ball. He's able to at least stick with the guy in front of him. But Nick, if there's one thing to say about Byard that's negative, it's that I do think his age shows on tape. You see him break quickly. You see him have pop in his breaks, but that top end speed that he probably had when he was a little bit younger, it just seems like he's lost a step. And especially when you're playing defensive back in the NFL, you need that step if you're going to play man coverage. So his man coverage ability suffers a little bit compared to his zone coverage. But I would be pretty surprised if the Bears, it's funny you mentioned that you watched the Eagles game. I'm curious to see if you came to this same conclusion. I thought the Eagles asked Byard to do a lot of the things that he was pretty poor at compared to Tennessee, who asked him to be Eddie Jackson. And that was good enough to get him on the trade market and ask the Eagles to trade an actual pick for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears are looking for him to return to what he does in Tennessee. And with that in mind, especially with some of the contracts we saw handed out at safety, the market wasn't as cheap as I think we expected. I like this signing at the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, I was more impressed with him on film than I thought I was gonna be because I assumed I mean, when I looked at his PFF grades, he was a top 10 safety, y'all, 5 of the last 7 years, and last year, I think it was, like, 23rd. So I was like, "Well, okay, I'm gonna see a little bit of a drop off from a guy that's, you know, a very sure tackler, one of the best tackling safeties in the NFL." A lot of turnovers, he'll punch the ball out at intercept. I'm like, "Okay, I'll see a drop off." And I want to watch the last 2 games because you'd think if you're declining, those would be your worst games. I mean, it's the playoff game, and then it's the throwaway Giants game that they lost. And I didn't see that. I still saw a good player. I mean, you said
Hmm.
his recognition and he doesn't get fooled by
No.
the play action. I mean, crossers, he'll pass one off to get the other crosser. I mean, he does a lot of good communication things that I was really impressed by. And I think you're right. I mean, I saw him play man. I thought he was pretty sticky.
And
But
he is
I just
until
don't
the
think that
play
they're going to have
progresses
him
for a little bit,
right.
right?
I just don't think they're going to have him do that as much. And plus, I saw them drop him down into the box a bunch. I'm like, dude, we'll just have Brisker do that. We'll have him play deep. And I watched the film. I had a big sense of comfort. I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
okay. He's not going to get tricked on the big boot throwback to the tight end. You know what I mean? Like we
Hmm.
saw in week 1 with Green Bay. Like a lot of those things, like he's gonna pass off or he's gonna let Stevenson or these young guys know what's going on. And we need that. We needed a veteran. So again, for 7.5 a year, I was pumped. How about the Bears having the first signing again this year? Were you surprised?
Them beating the market, the more we're learning about the way that Ryan Poles operates, the less I am becoming surprised with this. If only because, not to, give away the ghost here, right? But so the Bears enter free agency. We're all thinking D lineman or edge, right? Especially after they cleared that hole that I just talked about. I mean, it's
Mhm.
still there. It sure seemed to tip their cap as if the Bears are creating a cap spot that something big will fit into, right? But just like offensive tackle last year, they come away with no major edge rusher, at least so far, right? It's not to say there aren't guys like Calais Campbell, DJ Drummond, like all kinds of other players that are available, let alone if the Chargers do something with Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack. That would be your more name brand guy, even if I think the name would be bigger than the production. But Nick, it sure feels to me as if the Bears do not like negotiating against the open market so far. They're much more willing to negotiate with
Mhm.
another team for a trade package, and then once they've traded for that player, negotiate with that player for an extension, but they don't really want somebody else to get involved insofar as they're able to allow that. And by getting Byard before he got to the open market,
Yep.
I frankly thought they made that intention pretty clear. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Well, they seem very calculated. Like Poles has the amount that he's going to spend, and he has the directions that he wants to go. Like for example, running back's a great segue because
Mm-hmm.
they were in on Saquon Barkley, and then he probably heard how much he was getting, you know, offered from Houston and the Eagles, I think, were the other two suitors.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, nope. And then he pivots. He's like, I'm going to get this guy. And then he gets Swift first. So DeAndre Swift was signed, y'all. Running back was at
Yep.
Detroit his first 3 years. Traded for I think like a fourth last year to the Eagles. He had 1,000 yards last year. He's averaged I think 4.6 yards per carry in his
Mm-hmm.
career. Um, 3 years, 24 million, 15.3 million guaranteed. The first 2 years of the deal are 2 years, 16.5 million. And then the last year, I mean, if he sustains it, they'll keep him. His RAS, which that's a thing, right? 7.55. And I'm a big DeAndre Swift fan. I was a big fan of him out of college.
You
I was
mentioned
I
this.
thought I thought Detroit underutilized him, and then I thought he saw a little bit more of what Swift was going to be in Philly last year. So I have a little treat, Robert.
Oh,
I I've done scouting for a long time, y'all. I used to produce a document, whatever, a report, a publication called the Devi Report, which was skill position offensive players that were still in college. I did that for, gosh, 6, 7 years. It's like 150
that's
pages
awesome.
every year. So here's my DeAndre Swift scouting report, everybody. So this would have been in just after the 2018 season. So he's still in college. While DeAndre Swift was less efficient in 2018, he increased his volume as both a runner and receiver. He possesses a great build for a running back of a compact, but with lots of muscle. This allows Swift to bounce off tackle attempts and gain yards after contact. He also has good leverage in short yardage situations to move the pile. He's a physical back who can stiff arm defenders away on the outside or lower his shoulder to run over a defensive back. He combines power with very good cutting ability, which is a dangerous combination for his build. And his build is like 5'9, 215 to 220, y'all. Um, Light on his feet, Swift changes direction easily. He's a patient behind the line of scrimmage runner who reads his blockers correctly. Some call it a dead leg, but I often call it a pressure cut, is what he's very good at. Either way, Swift is elite with his agility move and makes defenders look silly often. He will also jump over defenders if necessary. In the open field, Swift prefers to bounce outside, but will cut inside if the grass is green. Near the line of scrimmage, he will do this and overestimate his athletic ability to not make the corner against defenders. At times, I'm not sure why Swift will lower his shoulder in the open field instead of attempting to make a defender miss. When Swift has an opening at the second level, he opens up and shows his speed in the open field. He makes subtle moves to maximize those runs and create large gains. His speed looks in the 4.5 range in the 40-yard dash. Spoiler alert, I think it was 4.45 at the combine.
Ooh.
Um, while I would categorize his speed as fast, he maintains good speed over long distances as well. Lastly, one of the big advantages of a modern day football is finding pass catching backs. Swift shows very good hands and will be an asset in the passing game. My NFL comp for him, Robert, back then
Mm-hmm.
was Le'Veon Bell.
Hey, that's pretty sweet comp. Now,
Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned Le'Veon because Le'Veon was one of the guys who most recently he got that bag from the New York Jets and might have been strike two, if not strike three, on the running back market as we knew it at the time because Le'Veon Bell's albatross contract became one of the bigger reasons for. Yeah, you got your hand up.
Sorry, I got breaking news. Per Adam Schefter, the Steelers are trading Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers.
Ugh. You had me really juiced up for that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was
I
like,
know.
the
I was
Bears.
hoping for Chicago because I like him.
Not to mention, what is this? Okay, so Panthers get Deontay Johnson and pick 240, and the Steelers are giving up pick 176. Man, that is nothing for Deontay Johnson. Russ, what you got to cook with, bro? All right, so
I
getting back
know.
to getting back to the Bears though, Nick. Swift seems like a very good player from what I've seen. I mean, I get that there are all kinds of people who want the old school three down back, and Swift doesn't pass block amazingly well, but that just means he fits right in with what Chicago has at running back right now. But I will ask you, were you surprised to see, forget the part where Swift is like the first signing that the Bears had, were you surprised to see the Bears lead the way, spending at running back in a way that the rest of the NFL seemed to follow suit? But for Chicago, it wasn't a position that I know I was looking at for some necessary upgrade. What did you think?
Yeah, I did because they got Roshan last year, and Swift seems like a better version of him, a more explosive, more agile, better pass catcher than him. But if you're going to invest money, I thought they would do it in other positions.
Hmm.
What this tells me, though, Robert, is Shane Waldron, Thomas Brown, new offensive staff wanted Swift. And they wanted another guy that we're going to talk about, I think, next. So to me, I think it's a little bit of a changing in the guard. The other thing to think about here, too, is that Swift is here for at least 2 years, maybe three. And Khalil Herbert is under contract for one more year. So
Hmm.
this is, I think, is a move also talking about for next year.
Not to mention, Nick, at least when I was watching Seahawks film, there's one player. I mean, the Seahawks have some dogs on offense. Geno is way better than I think people give him credit for. DK Metcalf is a monster alive. Tyler Lockett's a very good receiver, but their running back, Kenneth Walker, number 9, on that Seahawks tape, really pops off the tape. I mean, he's a very, very good back. So the more, especially once we saw Swift's name pop up, and now he's a Bear, I couldn't help but go back and think, okay, so Shane doesn't think the Bears running backs are good enough, huh? And it's funny, Nick, because we walk all the way back. You and I are big Khalil Herbert fans, especially because we see the best in Khalil Herbert. But I will just shoot you straight, Nick. I need to ask you a question very directly. Take the take the grace that we give rookies away from somebody like Roshan Johnson. Take the grace that we would give a guy like Herbert away for playing hurt and being tough within that. Were you let down by the Bears running backs at all last year? And do you think that a better running back room could have grinded out another win or two?
Oh, 100%. I thought that they played way better in 2022 than 2023. I think that, I mean, I know Herbert got injured and, like you said, Roshan's a rookie and Foreman had a good game or two in there, but I mean, the running game was so good in
Hmm.
2022, and you just wonder what happened in 2023, and it can't just be the line
Right.
because that I mean, it should have improved actually, if anything.
That's the funny part about watching running backs, right? Parsing out what is offensive line in a running game and what is the running back making plays is just really difficult. I mean, sometimes you look at these Shanahan style running back or these Shanahan running backs where seemingly anybody can pick up 100 yards in a game, right? And you say to yourself, well, then it must all be offensive line. Then you watch the Seahawks outside zone and you say, okay, Some of this is the play calling and the scheme in the offensive line, but a lot of this is the running back. And it felt to me, at least, Nick, like in 2022, Khalil Herbert was able to come in fresh and break all kinds of tackles as he played in his reserve role that we banged the table for play Herbert more. And then the moment he became the feature back, again, I'm sure some of this is because he got injured, but we didn't see him bounce off tacklers the way that he did in 2022. And there's one game in particular that this always makes me think about, and that's that I can't help but wonder if Ryan Poles had nearly made a decision to find some other answer at running back when they lost that Denver game. Because the Bears
Yep.
driving all the way down the field off of nearly no passes whatsoever. It was as if they were avoiding throwing the football under any circumstances for a reason that I will not speculate on because you and I have agreed to ban the quarterback topic, and I like that ban.
Yep.
So you're not going to hear anything about quarterback on this podcast for at least this show and the next show. At least the rest of the roster deserves it. But Nick, they get to the end, or they get to those couple plays there at the end where they run the ball, It's 4th and 1. They run the ball. And yes, we miss a block up front. But this happens a lot. And plenty of running backs find a way. And you get that
Mhm.
first down, and that game is over. And the
Mhm.
Bears win it. Instead, they don't. And so I'm not surprised because, again, rookie blinders off. I thought Roshan Johnson didn't live up to what I was hoping he would.
Nope.
And that's okay. But especially his struggles in pass blocking popped out to me as, oh man, this in particular is what we were supposed to be good at. So the
Mhm.
Bears giving Swift not a 1 year deal, not a 2 year deal with 1 year guaranteed, but a 3 year deal with 2 years guaranteed tells me that the Bears saw a major need at RB1, and this is their way of addressing it.
Well, and the other thing is this draft class of running backs, y'all, is not good. And I think this is a little bit of foreshadowing when you saw Saquon, Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, all these running backs get signed when last year it was crickets. No one was going to spend anything on running backs. And now they're like, we have to because there's nothing that good in the draft that's going to help us out. So to me, I think at least that you have to give credit to Poles is
You
that
do.
they have the same uh, foresight that a lot of these other franchises have. And I mean, even look at Philly, right? The 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 company line is we do not spend on running backs. We don't, we will figure out a way, blah, 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 blah. They spent 13 million, almost 13 million a year on Saquon Barkley. So
Which
I
is so funny, by the way, Nick, because when
right.
Swift's details first came out, it was like, oh gosh, oh man, we just spent $7-8 million a year for a guy who's gonna for 80% of what we could have spent on somebody like Saquon Barkley. Oh, I don't know about that. And I'm the wrong voice for that because I think Saquon is maybe a year, but even as short as a half year out from falling off that same carry cliff that Ezekiel Elliott only just fell off a couple of years ago. But then the details start coming out. Then we start seeing that Tony Pollard, off his ACL, he's getting darn near what Swift got. Swift's
Mhm.
25. Pollard is quite a bit older and had nearly no juice until the very late part of the year last year. Saquon's money comes out. He's getting near double what the Bears paid for Swift. Look, you don't have to enjoy the fact that Chicago spent on a running back, but Ryan Poles and his standard, here's our number, we're sticking with it process, he did get the market right, I
Yes.
think, on something
Yes.
like Swift. And again, makes the deal palatable, if nothing less, and makes the Bears offense better in a season where I think they can use all the offensive armaments that they can get.
Well, plus when you look at what Devin Singletary got as well, and like I
Yeah.
like Devin Singletary, the player, but he's not worth a lot in terms of money. And then when you look at what Josh Jacobs got, which is 14 million, basically all guaranteed in year one, that's also significant. So you put all that together, and I don't think that Chicago misread the market on running back at all.
No. And that brings us, speaking of offensive weaponry, to our first Bears signing of today, Tuesday, as the Bears signed former Chargers tight end Gerald Everett to a 2 year deal that's really nice in terms of the way the tight end market is shaken out. We saw former Seahawks 4th rounder Colby Parkinson. He got a $7.5 million AAV. Noah Fant got, what was it, $9 million AAV? Maybe a little more than that.
No, Noah got more than that. Here, I can pull it up as you look.
Point being that Gerald Everett now adds a move tight end, a U tight end component to a Bears offense that's got a really nice two-way tight end in Cole Kmet, who I'll tell you what I think is so funny about Cole,
So
by the
so
way.
the so real quick, Noah Fant is 2 years, 21,000,000, so over 10.
Over 10. And I mean, those are the former two Seahawks tight ends. What I'll tell you, Nick, I think is funny about somebody like Everett. Well, let's stick with Kmet for just a brief moment, because I've seen a whole lot of debate about whether Cole Kmet is a U or a Y, or at least everybody keeps trying to say he's a Y tight end. And I personally can't help but think that that's people saying, well, he's not a U tight end, so he must be a Y. But I can't help but think, Nick, the funniest part of Cole is that he wears both hats, at least decently well, right? He is the fastest blocking tight end you're going to find, but he's also a blocker that's only all right in a lot of what you see
Mhm.
wide tight ends asked to be. That's not me hating. That's his versatility is
Yep.
truly something that makes him very, very good. It's just that compared to a guy like Mercedes Lewis, he's not going to be digging a tackle or digging a defensive end off his spot anytime soon. And that's what a lot of these wide tight ends are asked to be. I bring up Kmet so that I can compare Everett, who's a much smoother mover. And even though he's used in not near the capacity that somebody like tight end or Cole Kmet is, he should be a nice receiving weapon in a Shane Waldron offense that if he pulls anything away from Seattle, he's going to use a lot more 12 personnel.
Mhm.
So I'm curious
Mhm.
to see what that means for the offense, because until we eventually figure out what the Bears are doing at quarterback, we're not going to know all of the trimmings of exactly what this offense is going to look like. But I do think Everett is a fun ad, certainly for guys like us that like to throw the ball. He is a throw the ball kind of tight end, and we
Yep.
love him for that. Plus, market value, solid. What do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I thought it was a good deal money wise, and I've liked Everett since he came out of South Alabama. His RAS score is 9.01, so he's athletic. He's 6'3", probably like 235, 240. So
Hmm.
he's a smaller guy, but he's shifty. Like I don't know that he's gonna be like a downfield threat. I mean, I don't know how many tight ends really are, but he'll catch the ball and he'll juke guys. He does not go down easily. He does not go out of bounds. He lowers his shoulder and he gets extra yards and will take the abuse. So
He
he's
will
done
hit.
that
He will
for his whole
hit.
career. And the good news is he has experience with this group, Waldron, Thomas Brown, with the Rams and with Seattle. So they know him well. Like they're like, hey, we want this guy, and they brought him in on purpose.
He's going to hit that stick route so hard, Nick.
Yes. Yep.
You're
Yep.
right, though. It's so funny because in the NFL, tight ends really just run what? Stick, the occasional out, a seam route now and again,
Mhm.
sometimes a
Chip
post,
and leak.
and over on those play action rollouts. It's not a super diverse route tree that the NFL generally asks of their guy. Oh, and how could I forget the hitch, right? But Everett should be able to play the role well. I think the best part for Everett, if you ask me, Everett should end up a nice decoy for Kmet to get open more, which might sound ridiculous at first, but Everett gives you a true U tight end to circle that's in the Bears offense. And that
Mhm.
means that, well, Komet's the Y. Why would he be running the seam on us? And that's generally how Komet makes his bread. I mean,
Yep.
let's not think too, or you don't have to think back that far to get back to 2022, where Cole Komet was third in the NFL in tight end touchdowns, and none of them were contested. I mean,
No.
maybe one of them, if you want to count the play where Fields drew the defender and then popped it over the top of his head and Komet skied up for it.
Yep.
But Komet made it look much more contested than it was. The other six are literal walk ins where there was
Mhm.
nobody near him or within 5, 6 yards. Komet's versatility and therefore what Everett playing the other role should help, I think, Komet get the best out of himself, because I do think he's best when the opposing defense treats him like a blocker. But that's just my 2 cents. God forbid
Mhm.
Komet gets any better at route running, and then you've got two tight ends that can play, right?
I to be honest, I was surprised Everett signed to be a backup. I thought he was going to sign and become a starter at another team in the NFL. So I was because I in my like free agent preview, I thought okay, Everett would be on the high end and like Mike Gesicki would be on the low end. But here they got him to be the backup. And so like when you look at him, you look at Swift, you look at Byard, those are all upgrades. Like I'm excited that the Bears improved in in all three spots, in my
Oh
opinion.
man, you want to talk about improvement. You do not have to have the highest opinion of this player, but the Bears, I don't know if there's any spot on the roster that got better than safety 3 today, where Jonathan Owens is an automatic multi-letter upgrade over Elijah Hicks. Sorry, Elijah. I know
Yep.
you're listening, but Owens is not this phenomenal player, and I'm not about to sell you on somebody that anybody who's a fan of Simone Biles, and if you don't know this Bears fan, you might want to ask your significant other or your wife. Simone Biles' husband has drawn a lot of negative attention for saying that he thinks that he's a better, well-renowned or better renowned, better athlete overall than Simone is, which is its own conversation that I do not need your take on, Nick. But that is all of the Jonathan Owens jokes in the world aside. The Bears adding depth at safety might kill my rookie safety dream, and I am sad about that, but it does give you a vision that the Bears want this DB room to be nice and deep before they go into the draft. I don't really know what that signals. I mean, I have my ideas, but the Bears getting Owens on what was this, a 4-year deal or like a $4 million 2-year deal, so
Yep.
$2 million AAV. It's
4.5.
it's a nice ad.
Yep.
It's too cheap for it to be a bad ad. And I'm just glad that we have somebody that isn't a former 7th round pick and plays like it, playing third safety, just in case whether it's Byard or Brisker goes down. And I
Mhm.
swear Brisker did go down at least once a game.
Yep. Yep. Well, honestly, like I'm more excited about this than I thought I was once I dove into it. I mean, his RAS score, y'all, is 9.69. So talking about athleticism, he has a 43-inch vertical.
That's insane.
43. 11-foot broad jump, 4.4340, which I mean, again, all that goes into that RAS. And then you have to put that to use on the field, right? So he's a special teamer. He'll be doing that and playing safety. So here's something I'm not sure you know about, Robert. So last year, again, just last year at safety, PFF graded him to be a better safety than these players. First one's going to hurt y'all. Better than Eddie
Yeah, I
Jackson.
knew you were going to say Eddie Jackson. He was a bottom half safety, according to
Yeah.
PFF.
Yep. Jalen Mills, John Johnson the third, Kirby Joseph, which we hear about from Detroit all the time, Justin Reed, Taylor Rapp, Jamal Adams, Jaron Curse. Like, okay, for a third safety, you have a guy that could maybe probably start at a few places. I'll take that. And the other part, because we also signed Tavares Moore, also from Green Bay, didn't play last year, got hurt. Very athletic, 9.24 RAS, 4.3240, 11.1 broad jump. Again, guys, athleticism, right? Both of them come from Green Bay. That also helps you in knowing the Green Bay's offense, right? Hey,
Hope so.
these are other things. Like those are small things that you're going to add, and for them to be your third, fourth, fifth, maybe safeties, that's also some good value in there.
I would have hoped that Mercedes Lewis would have been able to tell you more about Green Bay's offense, given that he came straight from the Packers offense, only a year removed, but we could table that conversation until later. Overall, Nick, I mean, the team has gotten better. Again, I'm still pretty curious as to what Poles wants to do with what sure feels to me like a whole bunch of ancillary signings. Like, okay, let me put this in meal terms, Nick. I feel like I'm being served all the appetizers and the sides, right? And I'm going, it's not that I won't eat your mashed potatoes. It's not that I'm
Mhm.
not going to enjoy the roasted Brussels sprouts, but it feels like you're waiting to serve me the meat. What is the meat? Like it doesn't feel like we've been given the entree yet, but hey, maybe Poles doesn't want one. Maybe like you're going to suggest at the end of the show, maybe Poles has his eyes on a potential trade candidate one way or another. I couldn't tell you because we
Right.
don't know. But we do have plenty of days of free agency left. I mean, this can
Mhm.
stretch on for quite some time. The Bears
Yep.
weren't technically done signing free agents last year until they signed Yannick Ngakoue weeks before the season started.
Yep.
So who's left on your grocery list here, Nick?
Well, I have one other thing to talk about. So we talked about the Ryan Bates trade last pod, but he has 2 years, $4 million per year left on his deal. Okay, y'all.
Hmm.
If you're watching the contracts of centers, of guards,
The
so
guards, man.
there's multiple guards at 20. John Runyon for Green Bay, who I think is like probably a replacement level guard, got 10 million per year to go to the Giants. I mean, people are getting paid. So when I look back at this deal now from Ryan Poles, I'm like, that's a good get right there.
Oh yeah, I mean, funny you talk about the contract stuff. I mean, we're now living in a world where Leonard Williams is a 20 million plus player, and Daniil Hunter is $25 million a year. I mean,
Justin Jones, 10 million a year?
don't
What?
mention Christian Wilkins and his insane near $30 million a year contract. I mean, Nick, I don't want to fluff Ryan Poles up any more than we naturally do, but Montez Sweat's deal has already become cheap. It's not
Yes.
supposed to feel cheap yet. But
Yes.
the Bears managed to get a young player at the same contract that Daniil Hunter at 30 is getting to
Mhm.
be pretty much the same pass rusher. So kudos to Poles for beating the market, because if you did somehow have to get him in free agency, and both of you and I know that that wouldn't have happened, but if they did somehow get him in free agency, I have very little doubt he would have gone for 28, 29, and maybe even pushed $30 million.
Right, right. And the rumors, y'all, we've heard is the Bears were in on Gabe Davis. They were in on Saquon Barkley. Anyone else that you can remember, Robert?
So nothing, not really. It's funny
Okay.
because if this is making me wonder something, Nick, and look, this breaks my heart. I want the wide receiver. It's funny because you look around the league, and I still believe what we said on the last podcast, where I think that there is an inefficiency right now in spending free agent money on offensive players outside of center, because generally it's harder to pay and get ROI on a guy like Gabe Davis, who I know he's got athletic tools, Nick, but I
Right.
just feel like he's leaving meat on the bone
Yep.
consistently. But then you look at defensive players and you can get some legit studs. They'll cost you a lot of money, but you might get more out of $25 million a year for Daniil Hunter than you will trying to pull $13 million out of Gabe Davis. And not to mention taking up the spot that could have been a drafted receiver that might have returned plenty more surplus value. But Nick, them pursuing Gabe Davis does have me wondering if
Right.
you and I have been saying, well, they should get an edge so that they can draft a receiver.
Mhm.
Do we have it backwards? Because they
I
might be
know.
trying to go get a receiver so they can draft an edge,
I
which,
know.
knowing a former offensive lineman and a former linebackers coach, now head coach of the team and GM, if you didn't pick that up, I'm talking about Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, I can easily see these two guys saying, hey, if we are drafting a quarterback, even if we're not, let's go defense and run the ball. Let's do this old school. Let's go
Mhm.
grab us a Dallas Turner or a Latu Latu or a Jared Verse and really beef up this defensive line. I can totally see it. And the
Yeah.
lack of a move at that position just makes me acknowledge it much more seriously than I think I was about a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they trade down from 9,
And
get
still
the
get
second
the
round
edge.
pick, get something else too. So let's talk about some free agents that are still out there
Do we want to
because
dwell on that a little? I feel like that's going to be a bombshell for people. You know what I'm
what one?
saying? Because,
What one is?
well, just more talking about this idea of, I think that there are a lot of Bears fans out there. If this is you, know that I've read you and I appreciate you, Bears fan that's listening. I think there are a lot of Bears fans that are so locked into wide receiver at 9, or they at least have
Yeah.
told themselves, oh, well, it'll be wide receiver or it'll be an offensive tackle or something, because why would it not be offense? Oh no, it's very possible, given that this class is not crazy deep at edge rusher, but a lot of the top guys, Nick, I feel like we've underrated them. That's not me just coping. That's me saying we acted in the early part of the draft class like the edges in this class are just flat out bad. There's not a Will Anderson, but Dallas Turner has a crazy ceiling. Latu
Mhm.
Latu, I think I'm screwing his name up, and I'm so sorry, bud. But Latu's got insane pass rush moves. Jared Verse is a very solid edge too that could become an edge one if he just works on his technique a little bit. If the Bears traded back and then they added an edge, Ryan Poles is going to sit there in the press conference and he's going to say, well, of course we acknowledge our desire at other positions like wide receiver, but Nick, this is going to be the buzzword, right? He's going to say, but it's a deep receiver class. And we felt like
It
the
is.
best way to take advantage of something
Yep.
like that was to draft a position that we needed and we value, a positionally important position like pass rusher, so that we can scoop up a receiver later that should be a second round pick in almost any other class. But in this class, he falls to the third round. If the Bears do this, it actually might optimize the roster. It just won't optimize them on the side of the ball. I think a lot of the Bears fans want to see optimize. How would you feel if this is the direction the Bears went?
Well, let me disagree with you on this because it could be okay. It could be. I get that. But let's go back and reflect on Matt Eberflus.
Hmm.
Matt Eberflus comes from Indy.
Yes.
Their best defensive lineman is DeForest Buckner.
Hmm.
And yeah, they had Yannick over there, but he's bounced around a bunch. It wasn't really like his guy. Didn't really have a ton of edge talent. He had one guy in the middle, and he made it work with the rest of the guys. Montez Sweat is the best end he's ever had.
Hmm.
Okay, and they got him. Maybe that's a Poles decision. Maybe it was a Flus decision. We don't know. He's never had two edges. So I also think that we're thinking of, well, listen, this is how all the other NFL teams are doing it. You have to have this good edge and this good edge, and this is what makes your defense. I don't know that that's his defense because his defense is more of, okay, we're going to condense the pocket. We're not going to bend the edge and go around and have the Robert Quinn 18 sack season. I don't know that's it. I think he wants more of the D tackles to do a lot of the work too. And so that might lead us into someone that's available by the way, might be available,
Might be
rumored to be available,
available.
Eric Armstead,
Mm.
which I think makes way more sense. I think that is your DeForest Buckner. Then you still have one of our favorite guys, Andrew Billings, plus the two kids. That I think makes a lot more sense for Flus's defense than having the Dallas Turner and Sweat and have the interior because he's never had that much talent before and he's been successful.
But to say that he's never had that much talent before and therefore he hasn't coveted it might not be totally fair. After all, he was never the guy in charge, right? Not to mention, hey, Nick, I'm just thinking out loud here. This doesn't even warrant the conspiracy hat, right? Like the it
We need it once per podcast
I
though.
know, and
Come
we
on,
may have to
Robert.
just figure another one out because Matt Eberflus, no matter what we could say about his safety, I think he's pretty safe going into 2024, especially if the Bears turn over at rookie quarterback. If they stick with Justin, the stakes are just going to be a little higher, and I think we all know that, right? But if they do draft a rookie, everybody's going to give him a little bit of a rookie buffer. But the 2024 team can't lose 12 games. I mean, it can't be a massive problem, right? It has to be pretty good and quite competitive. And I just find myself thinking, Nick, what head coach would want to hire an offensive coordinator, basically pat him on the shoulder and say, you are gonna make sure that I still have a job, right? Versus the comfort of feeling like you could do it yourself. And if the Bears continue to invest in defense, because there's no denying that edge is a position of plenty of positional value, then you could make any draft argument you want that might actually be a sweet spot pick of the draft when everybody else is focusing on, say, OT3 or wide receiver 3, a player you and I think is going to be very good, nearly no matter who it will be, right? Or they'll be looking at QB4 or tight end 1, and then you got edge 1. Or if you trade back a little, you might just get edge 2, and that's a huge position and a major scoop. It's just maybe not the scoop that some Bears fans will want. I'm not trying to tell you it's definitely going to happen. I'm just saying I see it as much more realistic than I think I did before free agency got kicked off because I really expected the Bears to land a big fish. And if you told me, Nick, that Matt Eberflus, who has one anchor end, and that's Montez Sweat in this case, but usually, I mean, he did sign Yannick Ngakoue. That other edge player is generally a little lighter, generally a little speedier. It would not shock me to put a name on it. My guess for that player that Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus were talking about during 1920 Football Drive, I think it was Dallas Turner. Long armed and yet 245, 250 pounds would fit everything they'd want in a backside defensive end. And I would just not be shocked, especially if somehow they do get Armstead, which would be sick. I would love for the Bears to spend. You and I are fanalists and writers. They go big, we get excited. That's just how this works,
Mhm.
right? But if they had a defensive line of Dallas Turner, Arik Armstead, Andrew Billings, and Montez Sweat with Zach Pickens, Gravon Dexter, and DeMarcus Walker filling in, I mean, I understand I'm just reading the roster, but Nick, that's a line that would get me
Yeah.
quite excited. They'd do
No,
some damage.
Turner's my favorite edge. You're not going to get a complaint from me. And he's also very young. When you start thinking of getting multiple contracts and control over a player that's still, I think, ascending with his talent. So no, you're with me there. I There are still some free agents out there though. Like if we just look at D line,
Yep.
there's still some players that intrigue me. that they could add that could change maybe where they go in the draft. So if we just stick at end, okay. Remember during the trade deadline last year, the Bears traded a second for Sweat, the 49ers traded a third for Chase Young, and Chicago's stupid. They don't know what they're doing. If you talk to who was it? Was it Tannenbaum or whomever? Like they don't. They're Ryan Poles doesn't like pick whatever it was, right? And then now Chase Young is not in San Francisco, and Montez Sweat looks like a great trade, but Chase Young's available, and he's young, and his PFF grade has always been ranked about 35th, I think, last year among DNs or better. Now, again, he had the injury in there. We all saw the loaf in the playoff game, y'all. Okay, I hear you, but he's younger and he has potential. And he's a big end that can push the pocket back. That kind of sounds like something Chicago would want. The other one I think of that's in that same mold, Robert, is Jadeveon Clowney. Again, I know it hasn't lived up to the hype, y'all. He had a pretty good year last year in Baltimore, and he would be a 1 year rental. I'd like him in Chicago.
I mean, the Bears, I think, could use a stopgap just to give them options. And I tend to think that we're going to see one, right? Another player that I would love to look, Nick, I would love to look you in the eyes and give you a bunch of guesses for who I think is going to potentially be a Bear. But the truth is that there are some of these names that you've written down here. Like, for instance, I couldn't tell you who Mike Dana is. I couldn't pick him out of a crowd. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it's just
Kansas
the truth.
City. Kansas City. Yeah,
I
he's more of a pocket pusher. He's nothing super bursty. Kyle
totally.
Van Noy's undersized. He'll be just your pass rush guy. Brandon Graham, great guy for the Eagles, but he's 35, so be 1 year. Derek Barnett's interesting because he was a first round
He
pick
is.
who's not super long arm, not super athletic. Towards ACL, kind of disappointed in Philly. Got cut, went to Houston, and kind of bounced back. And
Right.
so I'm like,
He could
maybe.
be interesting.
But then we
Young.
have um, the Bears are going to bring in DJ Wanham in
Mhm.
for a visit on I think Thursday.
Screwed his name up earlier.
Or yeah, I don't know if I did. Maybe I said it wrong. But he
No,
had
I
9
did.
sacks last year, and he's projected only at 6 million per year. So that sounds kind of like a Ryan Poles signing.
It does. The only thing with a guy like Wanham that I sit here and think, I'd say the same if the Bears were signing an offensive tackle, right? Is that the pay scale for edge, to me, you are getting what you pay for. This isn't a starter, right? You'd be hoping for more of a Raheem Green kind of player, right? And some extra juice, especially as a rotational guy. But I can't help thinking, Nick, that if they do sign a guy like Wanham, they aren't signing Wanham to allow DeMarcus Walker to be your full-time starter. At least I would assume they're not. Maybe they're really high on
Right.
Walker. Maybe they're willing to play that game. But again, the main thing I keep going back to, it's the second time I've said it, but I'll just repeat myself really fast, Nick, is Matty Eberflus will really shock me, really surprise me in a very positive way if he is willing to put offense before the current state of his defense. And the state of his defense is really good. It's just
Yep.
one more premier edge rusher away from being truly complete. And frankly, I think that's obvious. So maybe you could see Matt Eberflus give up control of what'll happen at number 9, maybe, and take an L for the team and then work around it. That's totally possible. I'll believe it when I see it because defensive coaches generally don't, which has me thinking that there's some kind of move coming on defensive line. The position I know I'm thinking about is more defensive tackle, and Sheldon Rankins fits into that a little bit. We already talked about Arik Armstead. DJ Reader is another name that I think is worth mentioning, and I haven't looked through the available big dogs. Maybe you know some of them, but if there is one part of the roster that Nick I don't think gets enough attention, Andrew Billings doesn't have a backup. And I don't want to hear that Zach Pickens is his backup. Zach Pickens is not 350 pounds. I mean,
No.
Andrew Billings plays like he's 2.5 gaps wide when he's at his best. And
Mhm.
even on his off day, he's taking up a gap and a half, if not two. If Zach Pickens has to play starting minutes with Tremaine Edmonds sitting behind him, the Bears are going to give up 5.5 to 6 yards a carry. And
Yep.
I wouldn't be shocked if Eberflus knows that. So adding some beef to the defensive line so that there's another guy. I mean, we saw what Mike Pennell did in Kansas City just last year. These beefy guys are not always expensive, but they can be really
Yeah.
core to your run defense integrity. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see the Bears potentially make a move there, as well as Nick, you and I have cautiously avoided a certain position that you and I love to talk about. You want to talk about what's happening from a market efficiency perspective when we talk about wide receiver? Because nearly everybody's still there.
I know. So, I mean, Darnell Mooney is gone. Um, I enjoyed his first 2 years at Chicago. 3 years, whatever.
He
Last year, I
got
thought was
paid.
good.
Happy he got his money.
Right, yeah, got paid, happy for him, man. 13 million per year. Gabe Davis got 13 million per year, but Calvin Ridley is out there. Now, what I think is happening,
Yeah, I don't think he's out there. I think you're
no,
about to say
I
the
know,
same
but
thing.
let's just so people know, if Calvin Ridley signs today or before when the new league year starts, which is 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, the Jaguars have to give up a second round pick to the Falcons. If they wait till after that moment, it's only a third round pick. I think he's going back to Jacksonville. But also Marquise Brown is out there, which I would like him in Chicago. Michael Thomas is out there. I already mentioned him. Tyler Boyd is still out there. Curtis Samuel is still out there. Josh Reynolds, OBJ, DJ Shark, Cedric Wilson, Quez Watkins. There's still some talent out there at
There is.
receiver. I'm surprised they weren't signed yet. But when every day we get further from the first day of free agency, y'all, guys get cheaper. And
But
so,
also, Nick, I thought you had this nailed. You mentioned the running back draft driving up or free agent running back value. In
mhm,
this case, a stacked receiver draft is
yes.
making wide receivers like their agents have just got to be bummed out with the offers that they're getting by and large. Now,
Mhm.
it sure seems as if the Bears are prioritizing an outside receiver. That's at least what Gabe Davis tells me, and receivers that can block because Gabe Davis does work hard as a blocker. So
Mhm.
guys like Josh Reynolds stick out to me a little more than guys like Curtis Samuel, though a Curtis Samuel type could easily be in play here if the Bears do have designs on an X receiver a little further down in the draft. It would just be a matter of who and when, right?
Well,
But that'd be
he
if they wanted to make Samuel their Taylor Gabriel. I mean, honestly, Nick, I don't want to go this far, but the comparisons practically write themselves. If the Bears do end up walking away with this, do draft an edge at 9, and they do draft like a Ricky Pearsall at 75, then all of a sudden you could be looking at Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, Trey. I'm getting the names wrong, aren't I? The
yeah.
joke is a 2018 level offensive group around
Mhm.
whoever the quarterback is, and I just think that'd be kind of funny. Don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing I have pounded the table for all off season is I would like whoever is at quarterback. That's all I'm going to say. I want the Bears to surround them with talent. And
Yes.
so let's say they go about this a different way. They don't do the draft, right? Which is what everyone says. Well, they don't have a second, right? Unless they do trade down from 9 and one's not there. I think 9 is overpay for Brian Thomas or Adonai Mitchell. So what if they went and they double dipped here? What if they did get Curtis Samuel and Josh Reynolds, or they went and got um, Marquise Brown and Michael Thomas? Again, I know that's spending a little more, but if they do come in as solid values for 1 year, and this is what you do, then you do go edge at 9. Then all of a sudden, your team is very complete and ready for your younger quarterback. And then next year you could maybe go after receivers. So I think there's multiple ways you can go about it. Having that many receivers still there is enticing.
It is. And I mean, a lot of this comes down to valuation and number, right? Because if you told me that they handed Josh Reynolds the same deal that somebody tried to hand Gabe Davis, I would throw up, right? Just because I'm not trying to hate on Josh. 13 mil a year for a guy like Josh Reynolds is just not going to happen, right?
Yep.
And so a lot of this does come down to value. I will mention, Nick, that it's funny because I see both sides of football as polar opposites for more reasons than just defense and offense and their obvious goals. Defense to me is a weak link question, right? The less guys you have on the team that are actively bad, the better on defense, because
Mhm.
simply by being all right, you're going to disrupt enough plays that an offense won't be able to get in true rhythm against you. Yes, of course, you'd love your field tilters, but they don't tilt the field as hard as Tyreek Hill does on offense, where
Right.
he pretty much by himself is a wide receiver room. And then you add Jalen Waddle, and now you've got one of the most dangerous passing attacks in football.
Yep.
It doesn't
Yep.
matter that there's not really a third option. I mean, and it keeps changing. In the Bears' case, I would wonder if they would be approaching offense and offensive team building kind of the same way that they'd be approaching defense of we're going to make sure everybody is at least pretty good. And I think I'd just rather them have less options, but those options are better then more options that are pretty solid. Because to be very real, both Fields and a rookie, I don't think are the decision maker that we might see like an old school pocket general, Nick Foles, Kirk Cousins. Gosh, I'm trying to think of some other really strong pocket generals. If you've got some that come to your mind, I guess like Tua Tagovailoa. It's not really Baker Mayfield. He's more of a close your eyes and throw it kind of guy, but you
Right.
get it, right? These
I
guys
get it.
that they play point guard. They put the ball to where they need to put the ball, and then they don't worry about it. They let their playmaker handle it. I would rather not have a 5 to 6 receiver offense, so to speak, for that's including the tight ends, for a rookie who I think is going to deal with less offensive complexity. And I don't think Fields really likes that either. So, like we've been talking about, an Odunze, a Neighbors, trading down for an AD Mitchell, a Keon Coleman, at least makes more sense to me. But to finish your question, if the Bears did do this, it would be fine. It would just
Mhm.
come down to does it work or not? Because it
Right.
would be executing a good plan that's just a completely different direction. It would
Right.
be right as opposed to left. And you can't not, it's not that you're not allowed to go right. You're definitely not allowed to try to do both. Just commit to one of them, right? But you'd have a complete team. It would just be a differently complete team than we planned.
Yeah. No, I agree. And so there's still some more options, but let me pound the table real quick. We know Ryan Poles listens to every episode. Okay.
Please
My guy is still out there, Ryan.
get one of
Eh,
them.
My
Get one of them. I
my
don't care.
guy, hold on. My guy is still here though. I just come on, man. At least for me, like let's pretend no one
100%.
else is here, Ryan. Okay. Bring Connor Williams in.
We're on
Get
the
the
same page.
athletic center. Okay. We all know that you can have Ryan Bates start for a while if you're worried about the ACL. He's a top 5 center. He's great in zone blocking, which is what we do. He's great in pass protection. He's going to help out your rookie quarterback because you want that veteran there. He's going to help out the rest of the interior. He's going to take the line from good to great. We
If
want Connor Williams, and he's still out there, which means his market is depreciating. Let's do this.
if Ryan Bates is the starting center in 2024, I won't be as mad as plenty of other Bears fans. I really liked Bates when the Bears made an RFA offer on him not too long ago, and him potentially being a really solid center actually checks out to me, Nick. But you want Connor Williams? I want one more offensive line ad. That's it. I don't care if
Mhm.
it's a reserve guy, like a swing guard. I don't care if it's Evan Brown, an extra center. I don't really care. Just please don't take this group, add one rookie center in the 4th round, wash your hands of it, and say, we did it, we're done. Like
Right.
one more guy, one more
Right.
guy, if only for old Uncle Robert here. Like, let's just create some
No,
assurance at this
we're,
position, you know?
we're in lockstep. So let's get to the exciting part of the pod, y'all. Okay. The Bears added some guys. There's still some guys available. There are some trade possibilities out there. And actually, I mean, I don't know how accurate this account is on Twitter, but this is big news from the Chargers. They have exactly 24 hours to become cap compliant. So they said it seems like Keenan Allen will be extended, although I've heard he's available via trade. Mike Williams is likely released. That's a guy you could sign for very cheap. He has had some injury issues, but he could definitely be an X. And then you have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. And that's where it gets interesting because they could be available. And that could be a guy that you could put at edge for a year or two, Robert, while you figure the rest of it out. Other guys available via trade. We know Cortland Sutton is out there, who, by the way, Robert, I don't know if you know this. Cortland Sutton follows me on Twitter. We
Oh,
we we I was speaking of that report and stuff that I wrote. I was such a big Cortland Sutton truther that we've DM'd a little bit. He follows me on Twitter
no way.
on that account and his like student business account when he was at SMU. So I'm a big Sutton fan. I would love him. He would be a great X.
He'd be a dog.
Um, T. Higgins, I think that would be a pipe dream. I don't know that they would trade significant draft capital and pay him. And the other one I think is funny. I'm just going to put out there is Carolina just dealt Brian Burns for a 2 and a 5.
Well, I'm
And
actually shocked you didn't put Josh Sweat on this.
oh, we could. I forgot Josh Sweat. Have the Sweat brothers.
Right. I mean, and besides, they're not related, are they? Are they related?
No, they're not related.
I
But
didn't think so.
I mean, they have to get rid of one edge. They have Huff, him, Nolan Smith, and Hassan Reddick. They have to get rid of one. The other one I
So
put down was Derek Brown from Carolina, D tackle, who we know
he'd
Chicago
be
likes.
he'd
But
be sweet. We do know Chicago likes him. It's funny
yeah,
we mentioned Josh Sweat, and by that I mean it's funny I brought him up. So you're welcome that we mentioned it. You want to
Right.
guess how long his arms are?
Ooh, does he have long arms?
He has 34 and 5/8 inch arms, as a
Bring
matter
him
of
in.
fact.
Well, this
That's not Montez. That's Josh.
you okay, now again, I'm just there's a quarterback on Chicago's roster that's been rumored for trades. I one hypothetical I thought is what if he goes to Philly, a very similar offense, and then they give us sweat because they have to get rid of the contract.
Not to mention, Nick, I mean, if we wanted to further theory craft by talking about the quarterback that will not be named, I am just saying, do you know how excited Philly would get if 6 weeks into the season, everybody's generally tiring out? Jalen Hurts takes a run wide, gets hit, goes down, bruised hip. Justin Fields comes into the game, fresh as a daisy, and runs like a maniac and a super athlete the way that we know he can. I mean, let's just be real here, Nick. Howie Roseman's not scared of a quarterback controversy.
No.
They've been down this road before. And of all the teams to potentially open the door and walk right into that, they
Mhm.
actually make an almost disgusting amount of sense. So,
Yeah.
the question I have for you, Nick, is all of these trades would come down to compensation. But let's say that Howie Roseman and Ryan Poles are on the phone, and now you get to be Ryan Poles. Howie says, "Look, I'll give you Josh Sweat, but I'm going to need I'm going to need our fourth back this year, and I'm going to need the lowest of your 2 seconds next year. Send him or keep it."
Nope. No, thank you, Howie. Good luck trying to offload him.
I'm intrigued. If
Because
nothing
well,
else, I
well,
would
hold on.
think about it.
Brian Burns was a 2 and a 5. You not tell me Josh Sweat is a 2 and a 4 after his year last year.
Okay, Josh Sweat's pretty good. Like,
He's not Brian Burns level.
Brian Burns might be more of a name than we make him. I love Burns. I
I
love
know.
Brian Burns, but we have, especially once Brian Burns got offered for 2 firsts, he got his name added into this top 10 pass rusher
Yeah.
echelon, but his play has not lived up to that. And
Right.
I can't help but wonder if his market value actually is pretty similar to Josh Sweat's. It,
Well, here's the thing I think about. Okay,
mhm.
they have 4 edges.
Yeah, they do.
Everyone knows they have to get rid of one.
They gotta.
So to me, I think this is a more of supply demand. Like we know you have to get rid of it. So you're a little bit more desperate. If you told me it was the 4 this year back to them and it was like a conditional 4 that could turn into a 3 next year,
Or the quarterback, because I was doing that trade without the quarterback.
yeah.
Let's say you send Justin along with the 4 this year, and maybe you kick would you go with a conditional 3 off of an extension?
Oh, that's too much.
That's stupid.
Because you have to pay him 24
You
to 26 a year
probably
anyway.
have to pay him 30 to be
Like
honest.
like you're not, he's not getting third. Josh Sweat is not that good. Come on.
Probably not, but when you trade for a guy like that in the last year of his deal, you're going to pay top of market, and top of market just went up, is all I'm saying.
I know it went up, but I mean, Danielle Hunter was 25.
Daniil Hunter's not 20, or Daniil Hunter isn't 25. He's
Yeah, but
29.
Josh Sweat is what, 26, 27? Let me look it up.
Is he? Let's see. Josh Sweat age. This is where we've gotten to the podcast. So he will be 27. You're totally right there. He's not as young a spring chicken as meets the eye. So that probably
Yeah.
brings that actually probably brings his AAV down to a place which is totally acceptable. I think a lot of these receivers are really interesting. Mike Williams would be that deal that would make me go, hmm, 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 every day. Every day, I think I'd change my mind on the Mike Williams deal if the Bears went in that direction, because he doesn't play more than half of his games, but the games that he does play, he is a really solid option here. Cortland Sutton, I love that you mentioned him. He's a dude. Not to mention, Denver is blatantly selling at
Yep.
below market prices, and we like that. We
Yep.
like that a lot. And
Yep.
so I'm interested, if nothing else. But we got to close the show up. So if
Yeah.
you had to pick one, what do you
I
want?
I've got well no, I have like a fun end of the show. So if I had to pick someone that Chicago traded for, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Um give me the D end.
Okay. Let's do it.
Give me Josh Sweat, sign Armstead, okay, and draft Roma Dunze, and then it's
I don't
Super
know if they
Bowl.
have
Let's
that
go,
money
baby.
to do all those, but it would be sick if they did.
Let's go. So here's the fun thing to end, okay? And this is Bears Twitter, okay? Uh Aronis Grisou got married over the weekend.
Congratulations,
Remember him?
Ronus.
He got married to a WNBA player, Sabrina. I'm not going to say her last name right. But they got married, and there's a picture. So it's from TMZ, our friend Brendan Shagru, right?
Hmm.
He tweeted that out there. But yeah, congrats to a former Bear getting married.
Talk about Bears making moves. Look at that. Like,
Yeah.
we got the union of several free agents and the new team that they'll spend the rest of their life with. And we've got the union between a former Bear and his future. So that's awesome. Congratulations to you, Ronus. Nick, I'm ready to get back to being glued to my phone so that I can wait for that next big Bears big move. What's coming for the rest of you, or for you, the rest of the week?
Nothing. I am just now getting healthy, so I'm gonna enjoy that and
Upgraded to
spend time
probable. Upgraded to
spend time
probable
with
for
my
the next
fiance,
show.
man. Because I'm probable now. I was very questionable. I coughed multiple times in this podcast, so I muted it. Hopefully, you guys don't have to hear all that.
Well, thank you, Nick. Your service is appreciated. Bears fans, go check out my VOD from last night as we walked through all kinds of different free agents. I have not recorded it yet, so I hope the show went well. But I'll see you there. If you were there, thank you for being there. I appreciate it every week. And then Nick, you and I'll record again pretty soon. And hopefully the Bears have given us something new to talk about. If not, we will find something. But until next time, Bears fan, bear down. And thanks so much for bearing with us.